Nobody actually tells you how scary it is when you leave the default normal path to chase your dream in your 20s. But funny enough, even though it was so scary, it was so, filled with negative emotions, it is probably still one of the best decisions I've made in my life so far. The problem is when most people think about like chasing a dream, quitting a job, they only focus on the point when you quit your job, the point when you tell the world like, hey, I'm quitting my job, hey, I'm chasing my dream. Or they focus on the high point when they've already achieved what they have achieved. What they miss is the journey between the 2 points. The parts when you have quit your job, the parts when you have, chosen to like not go down the default path, but you haven't really figured out what you're doing yet, or you haven't really succeeded yet. Fear of judgment, uncertainty, anxiety, when they all creep in. And that's what I really want to focus on today because, as someone who's walked the path myself, I really want to, just be unfiltered and be transparent and just talk about what it's actually like to, do what I just did last year, which is still kind of crazy to me, coming from a very traditional elite background. If you're new here, I'm Jason. I'm from Hong Kong, which is a very, very, elitist traditional society. Everyone I knew growing up worked very professional jobs, like working for the government, lawyers, different office jobs, and I never knew there was a different path. So when I got to university, I started reading books like The 4-Hour Workweek, The Millionaire Fast Lane. It really opened my eyes and, taught me about this completely different way of living that I never thought about. I went to law school and then I went into consulting, but I decided to leave that behind and really chase my dream and, build a life from the ground up, a life that I really want. So with that being said, let's talk about, like what are some of the fears, what are some of the problems that people don't actually address when you quit your job to, chase after these dreams in your 20s. I think it all starts before I actually quit my job, right? There's this book called The Pathless Path by Paul Millett. I recommend anyone who, have quit their job or anyone that's thinking about ever quitting their job to read this book. It's basically a book written by this guy who was, top of the food chain in the elite, corporate world. I think he worked at both McKinsey and BCG, which if you don't know are like some of the hardest corporate companies to get in the world. But then ultimately he quit that path to, try to find whatever he wants to work as, and eventually he became a writer. And the name of the book really summarized this, feeling of uncertainty. The path you're walking is a pathless path. Unlike, working in a big corporate, unlike going to graduate school where there's very clear, step by step, year by year planned out for you. You know exactly where you'll be in 3 years. You know exactly where you'll be in 5 years if you just stick it out. In this path of like chasing a dream, that really isn't the case. And the transitional period was really tough for me, Before I quit my job, I kept thinking about like, okay, how can I ensure I'll be successful in 5 years? How can I ensure, I know exactly what I'm doing month by month, year by year, my 3-year plan, my 5-year plan. But the truth is, uncertainty is part of the journey, and uncertainty is part of what makes, this path so attractive, because you never know what's gonna happen. When I first quit my job, I thought I was gonna, quit my job, and then learn coding and build, AI software, and then sell it to Google, and then move to Thailand to sell coconuts or something. That was the plan, right? 6 months in, that didn't really plan out properly because I realized A, I didn't really like coding as much, and B, coding with AI is good, but it's not production grade yet. So, which means it can get me 80% of the way there, but the last 20% is disastrous. It's so hard. And looking back, I should have tested those hypotheses a bit more and treated them more as experiment first before I dive right in. But that's for another day. What ended up happening was I ended up working with Google on this, one-off project. I got flown out to Taiwan to work with like some of the biggest, media, newspaper outlets, in Taiwan. Not some of, I think like the biggest ones. I did that. And then I started documenting my journey online. I started building a public on this channel. I got Daniel Dalen commenting on my stuff. And I built a 10K follower on Instagram as well. Last month, I joined a startup as their new head of growth because of what I've been doing, documenting my journey online, but also because I was, building stuff with AI and building a proper functional software, even though it didn't end up being, profitable and something that can sustain my livelihood. And that really is the pathless path. Me looking back in hindsight, it is so easy for me to say, yes, this was a good decision, but at the time, there was no way to tell it would have planned out this way. So uncertainty was super normal. And I guess the sense of uncertainty never really goes away, even now that I'm working in a startup. In a startup, there's also no clear like roadmap of progression, right? You don't get promoted to like senior startup guy after like 3 years. It all depends on how your startup does and what impact you're able to bring. The best thing I've been able to do to deal with this is really to see uncertainty as, a potential upside than a potential downside. See it not as what can happen that will like ruin my life, but what can happen that can, make my life amazing. Because in truth, like after all that has happened in last year, I think I got more positive out of the uncertainty than the negative. I think uncertainty is one thing that keeps a lot of people from pursuing this path, and even, keep people from succeeding when they have pursued this path. But another one is self-doubt. Funny enough, most people have their self-doubt before they, decide to pursue this path. For me, right, yes, I had some self-doubt before I pursued this path, but I've always been, a bit intentionally delusional about my ability, because I think that's needed as an entrepreneur. I think that's needed as someone who wants to be above average and wants to be an outlier. In fact, Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, the guy that made ChatGPT, he wrote an article like years ago laying out like the key traits of a successful person, right? And one of it is you have to be like delusionally confident. And that's what I've been trying to live by, being delusionally confident. But back to the point, hence why I didn't have much self-doubt before I quit my job, because I always thought I'll somehow make this work, right? But when you're really in the middle of it, when you're really like grinding day to day and things aren't really working, like 3 months in, 4 months in, I've kind of been over that honeymoon phase of being an entrepreneur, building, startups, whatever. I'm just day to day like coding, failing, coding, and then having stuff, different challenges, different problems that come up. For example, like that piece of code isn't really working, that bug started creeping up, and then I'm not like getting users. When that keep happening repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly, and you don't get any positive feedback, that's when the self-doubt really creeping, right? And I think for me that happened around 4 or 5 months into the journey. And I gotta say it was really scary, right? Because unlike in a corporate job, you don't really need that sort of validation. Your validation comes from your paycheck, comes from your promotion, comes from your performance review. Or in school, your validation comes from your grades, how you perform, do you get a first, do you get a 2-1. But as an entrepreneur, especially as an early stage entrepreneur, there's not a lot of these, big validations that you can immediately point to and say, hey, I am on track. Which is why self-doubt is so normal as an entrepreneur. I think back then I was really struggling, so I had to get advice from my other friend who also used to be a founder himself. He's built a lot of stuff, and he's also like a VC. And I was just talking to him like, how do I deal with this lack of feedback loop in my journey? And he said basically you have to measure these like KPIs, and you have to really, really try to find small wins and then build up momentum. And I think that was such a smart way of thinking about it. For example, let's say you're building a lemonade business. You're selling like bottled lemonade online, and you're in like the very early stage. You clearly like don't have a lemonade to sell yet. You don't have a website set up. You don't have like any people who want to buy your stuff. What you should be doing is to like set up KPIs, which is basically just like key performance indicators, small numbers, things that you can track to, tell yourself that you're somewhat on track. For example, you might say, okay, like for the coming month, I want to set up my website. I want to, find a manufacturer. Do they call them manufacturer if it's food and beverages? I'm not sure. Like, so a website, a manufacturer, and then someone to first person to like sign up to my wait list of my very cool lemonade business. Have these like written down, and then a month later review back on whether you're able to achieve them. And if you have, like, celebrate them, even if they're like such small things, like setting up a website. Celebrate them, because these small wins will be, the things that snowball into bigger momentum for you. Now, I think uncertainty and self-doubt are all quite like common for anyone that's ever think about going down this path. But another one that's very, very interesting to me, and something that I kind of understood on a theoretical level, but not practically how it felt, is financial stress. And I think it sounds very self-explanatory, right? Like, you're quitting a job to build a business, so you're making money yourself, and obviously there's financial stress. But my experience has been completely different from that, simple understanding of financial stress. Going back to before I quit my job, I've been able to save up enough money for me to survive without making a dime for like 12 months. Thanks to like the bull market from the past few years, during COVID and even the one before that. And when you look online, most advice on like quitting a job and stuff talks about, having a runway, having a safety net. And I thought like 12 months is plenty, 12 months is a lot of time. And so I quit my job, right? And in the first like month or two, thing is fine, I'm a bit stressed out because I'm used to making like not a lot of money, but like very decent money, month to month. But now I'm making like zero money. And then in the first month or two is fine because, I know that I have a safety net. But then month 3 and month 4, I'm still not making any money, right? Because, I chose a business model that is, looking back, very hard to do because I decided to build SaaS. Looking back, I should have chosen like a much easier, starter business model to begin with, like a service or an agency. But we can dive into that in another time if you guys are interested. Just like comment down below. The point is that, to build SaaS, to do software, especially if you're someone that does not have that experience, takes a long time, right? You need to like build the thing, test it out, get people to like try it. If they don't like the idea, scrap it and then change it to something else. But if they like the idea but it's not really hitting, you have to go back and change it again. So tons of time will be wasted in that process. I think in month 3 and 4, I am still not making any money, and it started being like quite stressful because yes, I have a lot of money in the bank. I can like just literally not do anything. Like I can theoretically not make any money for 10 months and then just start making money and I'll be fine. But the stress of knowing that all I have is, a cup like this. Yes, it's full, but I'm not like actively adding more water in it. It's so stressful because water is only coming out from the bottom. And looking back, what I would have preferred is not 12 months of savings. I would have much preferred having only 3 months worth of savings. But before I quit my job, I'm already making, maybe half of what I'm making in my day job. Because the hard part isn't saving money. The hard part is in, living that ramen lifestyle, going out less, cooking at home. That's not hard. That's easy. The hard part is making money. And once you have that figured out, you can figure out how to save more money. So that's something I really wish I knew. And I think the real way to deal with this really, yes, you can give yourself a pep talk. You can do meditation or something, which I do. But the best way to deal with financial stress is through financial means. So figure out what you're good at, what you can sell, what the market wants from you, and then just, make some money through that. And that's a good example of the Google project that I mentioned earlier, right? I got super lucky. I used to work in strategy consulting, and my friend works at, Financial Times. Financial Times has their own strategy consulting arm. And he mentioned they were doing this like one-off project that needed like some extra consultant that not only has consulting experience but also speak Chinese because they're flying to Taiwan and the clients are all Chinese. And I got super lucky. It was like a part-time / full-time. It was like 2 months long gig, and I decided to do it. And that's how I sort of like added more money whilst I was also building my startup. And to anyone that wants to do something like that as in like quit your job and chase your dream, I recommend like figuring out something that you can go back to immediately with flexibility, whether that's like freelancing, contractor work, or like you already have like a very small side business going on that's bringing you a little bit of money, which then you can focus on the bigger dream that you're chasing. I'll 100% like recommend that if you have the ability. But then looking back through all these, negative emotions like uncertainty, self-doubt, financial stress, I can still say like this has been one of the best decisions I've been in my life. And I think if you've listened through this all, this is pretty, self-explanatory on why. All the things I've experienced turns out to be fine. And that is such a strong realization because at the end of the day, yes, no one tells you about how scary it is, going from quitting a job and like reaching a goal and the moments in between. But everyone knows about the negative feelings, the fear you get before you actually start quitting your job. So everyone's here. Everyone understands like, oh, like what if it's really risky? What if it's like, what if I don't know what to do? What if I fail? But now that I've experienced, that part of the equation, and I understand that it's not as scary as I once thought it is. There's this great quote from Alex Hermosi who said, "Fear is a mile wide, but only an inch deep." And once you understand that to a core, because you've experienced it, you realize that, I can jump into this fear thing and then I'll, still be able to not drown because it looks scary. It's not actually that scary. That stays with you forever. And not only have I come out on top, I am in a much better situation right now in terms of my career and work than I was a year ago when I was still working in consulting. I'm still much better off, and I've grown a lot as an entrepreneur and as someone that, wants to continue chasing their dream in the future. And that's why this is, still one of the best decisions I've made in my life, given all those, fear, uncertainty, stress that I mentioned in the last, how long has it been? 20 minutes? I'm hoping when you watch this will be like 10-15 minutes. But yeah, that's all for me today. Follow for more, and let me know your thoughts, right? Have you quit your job? Do you want to quit your job? What's holding you back? Let me know and I can try to help. And with that being said, I'll see you next week.